What if the villain of the Bible wasn't always a villain? What if the greatest enemy of God was once his brightest light? Lucifer, the very name, echoes through centuries of fear, fire, and rebellion. But behind this name lies a deeper story, one not often told in churches or classrooms. A story hidden in ancient scrolls whispered by mystics and buried under centuries of dogma. Before he became the so-called devil, Lucifer was known as the morning star, a being of unimaginable beauty, power, and purpose. Not a red-horned monster, but a glorious spirit who walked among the heavens, praised for his light and wisdom. So what happened? How does a being so close to divine light fall into such darkness? Was it pride? A war in heaven? Or is there more to this story than we've been told? In this video, we will peel back the veil of myth and religion. We will explore ancient texts from the Bible, the Book of Enoch, Sumerian tablets, and even Gnostic writings. We'll travel back to the time before time, to when divine beings shaped creation, and when one chose a different path. This isn't just a story about good versus evil. It's about free will, rebellion, truth, and transformation. It's about you and the eternal struggle between light and shadow that lives within us all. But be warned, the truth may challenge everything you thought you knew. Because once you hear the full story of Lucifer, from glory to curse, you may never see the world the same way again. So, who was Lucifer really? A fallen angel? A misunderstood hero? Or a mirror reflecting our own inner darkness? Let's begin. To understand who Lucifer really is, we must go back, far beyond modern religion, before Christianity, before the Bible, even before the word Lucifer was ever written. In Latin, Lucifer simply means light bringer or morning star. The name appears only once in the Bible, in Isaiah 14:12. "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning?" But here's the twist. This verse wasn't even talking about a devil. It referred to a Babylonian king, mocked for his pride. Later, Christian interpreters gave it a new meaning, connecting it to Satan, the enemy of God. And just like that, the story was rewritten. Now let's rewind even further to the ancient Middle East. In Sumerian and Babylonian mythology, there were powerful beings called the Anunnaki. These were sky gods who came down from the heavens and ruled the earth. One of them, Enki, the god of wisdom, defied the higher gods to help humanity. He brought forbidden knowledge, just like the serpent in Eden. Sound familiar? Later, Jewish and Christian stories may have absorbed these older myths. The idea of a divine being who rebelled, who gave knowledge to humans, who was punished for it, shows up again and again. In Gnostic texts, early mystical writings not accepted by the church, Lucifer is not evil. He is seen as a liberator, a being who gave light to humanity trapped in darkness. So why did the church hide this? Because knowledge is power, and controlling the story means controlling the people. For centuries, the church taught that questioning authority was rebellion, and rebellion was sin. So Lucifer, the rebel angel, became the perfect symbol of disobedience. But from a philosophical view, Lucifer represents something much deeper. He symbolizes the awakening of consciousness, the moment when a soul begins to question, to seek truth beyond blind faith. Lucifer is the inner fire, the spark that says, "I want to know." And in a world ruled by fear and obedience, that spark is dangerous. This is not to say Lucifer is pure good. His story is a tragedy of imbalance, a soul too proud, too bold, reaching beyond limits without wisdom. But neither is he the monster of medieval paintings. He is a paradox, a symbol of divine light and the fall that comes when light forgets its source. And maybe that's why this story matters so much today. Because inside each of us, there is a part that wants to rise, to know, to shine. But there's also a shadow, one that can twist light into pride, or wisdom into arrogance. Lucifer's tale is not just about heaven and hell, it's a mirror, a warning, a call to balance light with humility, to remember that the brightest stars fall the hardest when they lose their connection to the divine. Imagine this. Before time as we know it, there was harmony in the heavens. Light flowed like rivers and celestial beings moved with pure purpose. Among them stood one of the most radiant beings ever created, Lucifer. He was not evil. He was beauty, intelligence, music, and light itself. In the book of Ezekiel, we find a mysterious verse that many believe is about Lucifer. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. You were anointed as a guardian cherub. This was not a monster. This was a masterpiece. Lucifer, the light bringer, held a high position among the divine beings. He was close to the throne of God, a guardian of sacred knowledge. But then something happened. He looked at his own light and thought it was his own. He forgot that his brightness came from the source. Pride entered. Not a pride of joy, but of ego. He wanted more than to reflect divine light. He wanted to be the source of it. This is the moment most traditions describe as the fall. Now, here's where it gets deep. This fall is not just a cosmic event. It's a symbol of what happens when a being chooses self over unity, when it separates from divine order. Lucifer didn't just fall from heaven, he fell out of alignment. In esoteric teachings, this fall is not punishment, but consequence, a universal law in action, like a star that burns too bright and collapses under its own weight. But the story doesn't stop there. Enter the Garden of Eden, a place of innocence, a place where humans, newly created, were told not to eat from the tree of knowledge. Then comes the serpent. Was it Satan? Was it Lucifer in another form? The Bible is not clear, but many traditions connect this serpent with the same light bringer. Why? Because he offers knowledge. He says, "Your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods." This is not just a trick. This is a test, a temptation, but also an invitation to evolve. Now pause here. This is where things get really interesting. The traditional church teaches that this act, the eating of the fruit, was mankind's first sin. But Gnostic traditions say the opposite. They say it was humanity's first awakening. That Lucifer, or the serpent, gave humans the spark of consciousness, the ability to know right from wrong, to make choices, to grow. In this view, Lucifer becomes a misunderstood hero, a Prometheus figure, like in Greek mythology, who stole fire from the gods and gave it to mankind. He was punished for it, but without him, we would remain in darkness. This doesn't mean he is perfect, it means he is complex. And maybe that's the most dangerous idea of all. Because if Lucifer is not the devil we were told, then maybe the entire system of fear and blind obedience starts to crack. Maybe we are not just sinners, but seekers. Not fallen, but rising. The church had to control this story, to say, do not question. Do not seek knowledge, just obey. Because if humanity saw Lucifer as a symbol of enlightenment, of questioning, of divine curiosity, then the power of guilt and fear would weaken. And that's why, over time, the Lightbringer became the Lord of Darkness, painted with horns, twisted by fear, and burned into our minds as pure evil. But look closer, and you'll find echoes of his light in every myth, every book, every soul that ever asked, "Who am I really? Why am I here? Is there more than what I've been told?" Lucifer, in this sense, is not a being outside of us. He is the voice within that pushes us to ask, to search, to awaken. But he also reminds us, if we awaken without love, we fall into ego. If we rise without humility, we burn out. This is not a call to worship him. It's a call to understand what he really represents. A fall from glory, a rise through knowledge, and the eternal balance between light and pride. So far, We've seen Lucifer not just as a fallen angel, but as a symbol of something much bigger, the human journey of awakening, temptation, pride, and purpose. But the story goes even deeper. Let's talk about the name itself, Lucifer. In Latin, Lucifer simply means light bringer or morning star. In fact, in the book of Isaiah 14:12, the verse that became famous says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning?" But here's the mystery. Isaiah was actually talking about a Babylonian king, not a fallen angel. The name Lucifer was added in later Latin translations. In the original Hebrew, the word is Hillel ben Shashar, shining one, son of the dawn. So how did we go from a poetic metaphor to the Prince of Darkness? Simple layers of fear, power, and politics. In early Christianity, there were many different views. The Gnostics, for example, believed that the true God was pure light, and that the God of the Old Testament was a false god, a demiurge who trapped souls in matter. They believed Lucifer was not the devil, but a bringer of knowledge, a rebel against false authority. To the church, that was dangerous. They needed one version of truth, one authority. So voices that questioned the official story were silenced. Books were banned, gospels were hidden, and Lucifer was cast into hell forever. But not all traditions agreed. In the Middle East, some Sufi mystics believed Lucifer, called Iblis in Islamic texts, refused to bow to Adam not out of pride, but out of pure devotion to God. He said, "How can I bow to anyone but you, my Lord?" A paradox. He disobeyed yet remained loyal, prideful but sincere. Now think about this deeply. What if Lucifer represents that strange moment when love turns into pride and wisdom becomes rebellion? What if he's not the enemy, but the shadow of light? Every great light casts a great shadow, and without that shadow, we would never learn how to truly choose. You see, the real power of Lucifer's story is not in worship or fear. It's in what it teaches us about ourselves. We all carry a little Lucifer inside. That moment when we think we know better. When we break a rule not out of evil, but out of curiosity. When we chase our own glory and forget the source that gave us life. Lucifer is not just a myth. He's a mirror. And if we're brave enough to look into it, we'll see the deeper truth. That fall and rise are part of the same path. This is echoed in the ancient concept of alchemy. In alchemy, the lead, our dense, ego self must go through a fall, a burning, a breaking down before it can be turned into gold, the symbol of enlightenment. Lucifer's fall, in this sense, is the first stage of the alchemical journey. It is called nigredo, the blackening, a dark night of the soul. But without nigredo, there can be no transformation, no light, no gold. Even in the book of Revelation, there's something strange. It says, "To the one who overcomes, I will give the morning star." Wait, isn't Lucifer the morning star? Why would God promise that? Unless the morning star was never the enemy, but the gift we receive after passing through the fire. A symbol of light earned, not inherited. Maybe that's the great secret. Lucifer is not about evil, he is about choice. He shows us what happens when we separate from divine order and what it takes to return to it, wiser, humbler, and stronger. He warns us of the danger of ego, but he also shows us the power of knowledge, the hunger to grow, the fire within that refuses to stay small. That's why he has been feared for centuries, not because he is pure evil, but because his story unlocks questions no one in power wants us to ask. What if obedience is not always good? What if doubt is part of the path? What if our fall is how we rise? And perhaps most dangerously, what if the light we fear is actually our own potential? So now, let's return to where we began. Lucifer, the name whispered with fear, painted with horns, cast into fire. But beneath all the fear, myth, and control, we found something far more real, something more human, more spiritual. Lucifer is not just a villain in some ancient book. He is a symbol, a symbol of the soul's rebellion, of the moment when light separates from the source, of the fire inside every one of us that says, I want to know more, I want to become more. He represents what happens when wisdom turns into pride, when free will walks away from divine harmony, when a being of light forgets where it came from. But he also shows us something sacred, that even in the fall there is meaning. Even in darkness there is the seed of light. Because the journey of Lucifer is the journey of every soul, from glory to curse, and if we choose, back to glory again. This is why ancient mystics, alchemists, and seekers of truth never feared Lucifer. They studied him. They saw in him not the devil, but a lesson, a warning, and a guide. They understood that real evil is not rebellion, it is forgetting. Forgetting the light, forgetting the source, forgetting that we are connected to something higher. So, the next time you hear the name Lucifer, don't just think of hellfire and punishment. Think of the light that once was. Think of the part of you that wants to rise, but sometimes falls. And ask yourself, what if the real story of Lucifer is the story of you? A soul learning, falling, failing, but always trying to return to the light. If this awakens something inside you, if you felt a shift, a question, a spark, then you're already on the path. Like, subscribe, and stay with us, because the deeper truths have only just begun to unfold. This is Unlocking the Mysteries, and we're only getting started.